Hi, my name's Phil Craig. I'm a writer, a TV producer, a lover of stories, and a connoisseur of scandal. And I'm on a mission to bring you the most scandalous tales ever told. So thanks for joining me here at the Scandal Mongers podcast. I'm home to the familiar environment of the Australian bar, all the way from Australia. And what a trip. Oh my goodness. I've only been home a few days, still a little bit jet lagged. And I brought back a souvenir from my trip. Yep. Sciatica. Has anybody ever had it? Oh my goodness, not nice. And the moral of this story, guys, by the way, is never travel economy. Jeez. Anyway, actually, welcome to the program. Later on, I'm talking to Clive Irving about really interesting things. He's a friend of the show. You know the drill. There will be a preamble. You can fast forward it if you like. But yes, thanks to the generosity of Mrs. Craig, I did travel to Australia and back in the comfort to which I think I am accustomed at the right end of the plane. No worries. Internal flights, I go economy, it's cheaper. Honestly, that flight from Melbourne, no, when it was Perth to Melbourne, I am sitting in an economy seat and this very, very large woman sits next to me. And there are no other seats on the plane. It's full. So, I just couldn't get comfortable, and she was like encroaching a lot. And I kind of sort of sat there and I was beginning to feel a bit twisted and pushed up against the window. I could begin to feel something not very nice happening in my back. And as every day went on, that feeling didn't go away. It got worse and worse. And by the time I got home, it was quite painful. And right now it's really, really painful. And it's hard to sleep. And I'm using a stick. And I've seen the doctor. And, hopefully time and some anti-inflammatory drugs will heal. But if any of you have had sciatica, you will know it is not fun, is it? So send me your personal quack cures, anything. I'll try anything. Hanging upside down from the rafters, lying on my back. I've got various yoga exercises people have sent me, but I can't do them because it hurts too much. Anyway, you're not tuning in to hear me whinging on. Let me tell you about my wonderful trip. It was wonderful. Forget the sciatica. It was worth it. Such a good trip. Lots of talks. Lots of people came. And especially, thank you so much for any of you watching or listening to this who came to see me in Australia. I think about a dozen people from the podcast came to various of the events, which was so touching. Thank you, all of you who came. I think I saw people in Melbourne, in Sydney, and in Canberra from the pod. And especially Anne Carbody. Hello, Anne, who we met, and you gave me a gift. You came down from Hunter Valley to Sydney, quite a distance, with a lovely gift, with your son, and a lovely gift, and a card. And we opened the gift at the Australian bar, which was a bottle of Hunter Valley wine, of course. And the card was lovely. Thank you for that. And you said you like my preambles. Opinions are varied on this question, but I'm going to keep going with the preambles. Some of you seem to like the rambles. And if you don't, you can always jump to the better bits later on. Yeah, lovely trip. You want to see the pictures, don't you? Of course you do. Let me just share the screen here. How are we going to do this? What are we going to do? Hang on. It always seems to take a while for me to find the right way of doing this. I feel sure they move the button every week. Okay. No, that's not it. Phil, get a grip. Right. Okay, I'm going to have to edit this. Oh, no, wait a minute. Here we go. There we are. Put that down. Put this up. Here we go. Now we're talking. Sorry about that little hiatus. Just a few samples. First night, first speech was this wonderful place up in the Perth Hills. Isn't that beautiful? In a fire station, yeah. My event in Perth was cancelled. So some of my mates in the military history community said, we can't have you not doing a speech. So one of them knew friends who are volunteer firemen and said they'd love to hear you talk. So my military history chums and the volunteer firemen got the benefit of my wisdom high in the Perth Hills. Lovely evening. And I feel sure I sold more books there than I would have done in the library in Perth. So that was lovely. There they all are having a chat. Yep. The Rolling Stone Carragullen Volunteer Bushfire Brigade, me and my mate Brendan. And there we are. We've got a stubby holder, who's just sitting behind me at the bar now. A lovely souvenir of a lovely evening. Yeah, more shots of Perth. How Australian is that, guys? A beer, a pie, ketchup, watching the cricket at the Wacker, the graveyard of English cricket. Well, they don't play tests there anymore, but I went to see a local state game and it was great fun. Yeah, that was my event in Melbourne. Some of you went to. There I am chatting away to Claire Wright, showing off the book. That was fun. Another event in Melbourne, the military history community. Yes, mostly gentlemen of a certain age, not old men, but lovely, a very, very well-educated and informed bunch of people, including a couple of former generals in the Australian Army. That was fascinating. Then I went to Sydney, and there you are, Anne. There's Anne with the gift, which was such a lovely thing. Thank you so much for coming down. Appreciate that. And there's it got fuller. And there's Chris Masters, who was a legend in Australia, who interviewed me about the book. That was fun. Look at that, top of the bill at the Petersham Bowling Club, or as every Australian would call it, the Bolo. Yeah, that was fun too. I was seeing a few old friends. Another iconic Australian Sydney institution, Erskineville Hotel. They're the Imperial, the home of Priscilla. Well, the opening scene of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, was shot there. And actually, when I was in Australia, the ABC, I commissioned a film on Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, so I know rather a lot about it. My old place of work, the ABC in Sydney, right across from the TAFE, technical college. And now when I was working there 10 years ago, I would walk there, and my wife, who was doing a library course, would walk there. And we'd walk to each other to work at college. And that was a rather lovely memory. Yeah, the jacarandas are out in Sydney. Beautiful time of the year there, early spring. Jane Carrow, friend of mine, writer, broadcaster, Australians will know her, having a modest champagne tea in a posh hotel. Oh, my book's on sale in Canberra. Canberra, wow, that was the highlight, I think, really. I mean, to speak at the War Memorial in Canberra was an honour. It's such an amazing place. There really is no better place of remembrance and history in the world, I think. And look at the weather, guys. That was the perfect sort of high 20s, bit of a breeze, Canberra day. Yeah, driving down there, seeing the kangaroos, mostly dead by the side of the road, but some hopping about in the fields. Lovely weather, lovely people. There I am on stage with Christine Helliwell, who's an author who's also written about some of the things I've written about. She's a good friend. Obviously, I'm making a laugh because I'm so amusing. And there we are from the audience. And yeah, that was just an absolute hoot. And I really enjoyed myself. Now, what else? Oh, so much. Oh, no, wait a minute. That's not what I intended. I'll close that. I want to show you some of the highlights, don't I, from last week's comments, because that's always fun. And last week's show got some really good comments. And also, again, not particularly highly rated in terms of the numbers of people watching on YouTube, but loads of people seem to be exploring the old episodes. A lot of people commenting on those, I've noticed. Maybe you're new to the pod and you're having a little rummage around in the back catalogue. Yeah, people writing about the Lord Lucan show and lots of the other royal shows and some of the World War II stuff. It's great. Lots of activity on the pod. This is what we like to see. All right, I'm going to try one more time. Can I find this? Can I find this? Yeah. Yeah, I seem to be screen sharing more than perhaps I should. Anyway, yeah. Hopefully you can see me and not what I'm looking at. So Cheryl Delange, your guests never fail to amaze me, says Cheryl, and bring a fresh perspective to what one thinks is the whole. Thank you, Phil and Roger. Yes, my friend Roger Morehouse and I chatting away about U-boats. Terrific stuff as ever. Jeremy Gardner. Hello, Jeremy. Well done. Enjoy Oz, Monsieur Craig. However, please ensure we get a proper rambling rant at the next one. Well, there you are. Here you are. I'm right in the middle of it. Tan Louise, another fantastic interview. I can't imagine me inside a vessel that become my steel coffin. Yes, it really brings it to life. It's a good show. Mary J5593, thank you for this edition, Phil. It was quite emotional listening to it. We forget sometimes that in war, it's just human beings fighting other human beings. Very true, very true. So, yeah, I'm back. Britain is scandal-ridden. I mean, more so than ever, really. I mean, where do you start? I mean, I'll be talking about to Clive shortly about his take on Epstein, the new book, and what's going on with Prince Andrew, where we are with that. I've also, by the time this goes out, I will have done a live conversation with Shauna from the vintage read. Some of you may already have seen it. We're going to talk through our reactions to the Virginia Giuffrie book, which we've both read. And it is astonishing, really. I mean, really quite remarkable. The detail, the scale of it, the honesty. I mean, even when it comes to things that sometimes people have challenged her about, you really do feel taken into that world that she herself was taken into. And what an extraordinary world and a horrible world. Sort of gaudy and brilliant and beautiful, but dark and corrupt and abusive and fundamentally horribly insincere and chewing people up like her. A lot of it's about class, a lot of it's about money, a lot of it's about abuse. Yeah, and it seems even though it's set 20 odd years ago, it's like I hope, like a different world. And talking of which, other scandals that seem to be raging around subjects that we've covered in this podcast. Mohammed Fayyad's back in the news. Well, his story, he's now, not only him, but the organisation is being accused of trafficking, which is a bit how they got Epstein. A woman in France has taken it up a notch with her allegations about how she was treated. And there is, I think, possibly some similarity in the Epstein and the Fayyad story. You know, slightly poor girls shown into this world, perhaps excited to be in it at the beginning, this world of glamour and fame and celebrity and royalty and excess and jumping on planes to exotic places. And there's a price. The price is they have to become basically, put their bodies on the line for the people who are employing them. In Fayyad's case, it would seem the allegations are to be at his beck and call sexually. Obviously, with Epstein was that as well, but also he sort of used these women as favours, as presents, really, to his powerful friends, many of whom were his friends because of that. You know, but there is a similarity, I think. The story's not believed. People having friends in high places. Obviously, Fayyad had friends in very high places. At the peak of his powers, both in London and Paris and all around the world. But now the story finally coming out. So that's one to watch. I'm sure we'll come back to that. Well, I mean, it's just so much. I talk a bit about British politics. I'm not sure how many of you are that interested, but Starmer's government seems to be going through a kind of endless crisis of scandals. And this is weird because those of us, including me who voted for him, really kind of bought the idea he was a bit different, maybe a bit boring, a bit like a bank manager, but sort of wise, respectable. He'd run a kind of government without all of the kind of drama and scandal and infighting and vendettas that marked the last Conservative government. And he traded on that image. And yet he's this one scandal after another. He's lost numerous ministers. You know, Minister for Homelessness, turned out she was making people homeless. Minister for Anti-Corruption, turned out she was involved in a corruption story. Minister for Housing she admitted to doing a dodgy deal on a house, but she says by mistake she had to go. And there was this thing about his funding his campaign, why all that was kept secret. That's rumbling on. But the two big ones really are the rape gang scandal, which we've talked about before. You know, Julie Bindel was on the programme talking about that. You know, the tens of thousands of girls, children really, who are sucked into this grooming gang, rape gang scandal in Britain. The story of the officials who looked the other way, occasionally even helped the abusers. That story has never come out. Julie talks about that. And it's a world where the Labour Party are all over it, because it's almost always in cities that Labour controlled. Not always, mostly. And the weird thing is the whistleblowers were all Labour too, the Labour councillors, Labour MPs. But they were not listened to because it was too difficult. Oh my God, we can't, because that would mean we're racist. We can't get into the fact that so many of these gangs, pretty much all of them, what was formerly called grooming gangs, were from that community of second or third generation immigrants from Pakistani backgrounds, clan-based societies. Yeah, secretive. And yeah, getting these girls, often through, you know the story, presents and money and declarations of love. And then slowly but surely it becomes abusive, and they pimp them out and they abuse them and they can't escape and they beat them up. In some cases, the girls were killed. A truly horrific story, the greatest scandal really in Britain of the last, probably my lifetime, in terms of social policy. And the government is terribly torn on this because the sort of big inquiry that everybody's been pushing for will inevitably shine a light on people who made their careers in Labour, who are councillors, who are social workers, who ran children's homes, who are in the police, who did the wrong thing. Maybe for the right reasons sometimes. Community cohesion was held up as a greater good, but no, they did the wrong thing. And I think Labour had to be kicked and screaming to this inquiry that they're now setting up. And this week, as I'm sure many of you will know, several of the victims have walked out saying that they're not going to take part in this, the survivors, I mean, because they claim the government's trying to dilute it and not focus in on what they want to be focused in on, which is the culpability of the people who are meant to be protecting and looking out for these children. The Minister, Jess Phillips, a famous campaigner for women's rights. I used to really admire Jess Phillips. She's in a terrible situation, maybe because, well, I don't know. She seems to have gone into Parliament slightly out of control. I don't know whether she'd had a drink. I don't know if that's part of it. Perhaps she had, perhaps she hadn't. But she really lost her temper in Parliament. She made a bit of a fool of herself, and she appeared to kind of dismiss these survivors, and that's terrible. And they're all calling for her to resign. And I don't know whether she will, or Starmer will make her go. But it's not a good look for a government where they've got this problem with, they've got this problem hanging over them that nobody really believes they want to get to the truth. So that's a scandal. And then separate to that and running in parallel with all of this is what's called the China crisis, in which the government appears, and this actually maybe is the most politically dangerous of them all, because the rape gang scandal, that's going to run for a long time and it might cost them votes and reputation. But this one, the China thing, could be more directly threatening to their position in Parliament, because the allegation is that a criminal case on Chinese spies was stopped by various people in government not providing what they should have provided. And it's all very complicated because who's talked to who and when. But boil it all down, Rachel Reeves, our Chancellor, had gone to China. There was talks of all kinds of economic deals. They need an economic boost. And then suddenly this case doesn't go forward and everybody wonders why. And the allegation now is that with a nod and a wink, it was allowed to drop to keep the Chinese sweet. And Parliament was not told the truth. And when that comes into it, when there's potential misleading of Parliament, it can get quite nasty. I'm not saying Starmer will be thrown out. He's got a massive majority. But it might add to the growing pressure on him. There's just been another by-election, as I record this yesterday. Labour's votes collapsed. A lot of his MPs are very worried. This might be, the China crisis thing might be the trigger. Who knows? It's not going well. I voted for him. I'm disappointed. I really am. It's still, well, relatively early days, but they've made a pretty terrible job of it. Sorry to say. I am sorry to say that, but that's how I feel about looking back. Maybe Rishi Sunak, our last Conservative Prime Minister, who was probably the best of them, the many we had, maybe I should have voted for him, because I think he might have done a better job. So there you go. What else? I don't know. There's my rambling preamble. So Clive Irving, one of the most, well, I mean, he's a legend. Those of you who've seen him on the show before, you'll know. He set up the Sunday Times Insight team, which is like one of the world's greatest investigative journalist units. He was a managing editor of various newspapers. He lives in America now, follows American politics. I think he would agree, slightly from the left. He works with people he's worked for Tina Brown, The Daily Beast, various magazines, but his particular interest has been in, well, A, the royal family, and B, Epstein. So I thought it would be good to talk to him to try and find out what he thinks about all the latest revelations and stories and allegations. So that's what I've done. Thank you for listening to this. I'll see you at the end, and I hope you enjoy Clive. Thank you. Bye. Clive, well, where do we start?
I don't know. Where do we start? I'll tell you one way of starting, which I find fascinating, is it's a sort of media story. You tend to forget how long this has been going on, how long the Epstein case has been going along, and that kind of the long tail it has keeps coming back up again. And my favourite reporter for doing the early stuff um, is she worked on the Daily Beast, and she she sorry, she faced a lot of opposition, and her name is Conchita Sarnoff. Um, and she did a number of pieces for when the Daily Beast was edited by Tina Brown. And at one point, her pieces started to annoy Epstein so much that he and a posse of his lawyers turned up at the Daily Beast offices around 2014 or 15 and tried to threaten her and Tina, but Tina told them to bugger off, basically.
Yeah.
And
She's not easily threatened, is she?
yeah, right. Uh, so Conchita went right back to 2001, 2002 in her reporting because she wanted to cover and look at the way the initial case against Epstein was basically he had a sweetheart deal with the DA in Florida, and he served just 1 year of sort of minimal house arrest stuff. And so at that point, all the evidence that was building up about the operation that he was running um, got suppressed. But she built a really complete picture of the system where the procuring was being led by Maxwell, but Maxwell and Epstein themselves had other lesser procurers, younger women who were recruiting women that they knew. So there was already an established chain of procurement from underage girls, usually at in living in the poorer neighborhoods, because one of the things about Palm Beach obviously is the juxtaposition of extremely rich people with extremely poor people, one side of the tracks and the other side of the tracks, literally. As the railroad goes down the whole length of Florida, on the east side you've got all the money, and on the west side you've got the middle class and then the poorer people. So that was an established, if you like, it as a kind of infrastructure that was put in place and was already working by 2001, 2002, and so on. And so what Conchita Sarnoff was able to establish and name were all the people who were in the indictments brought against Epstein in the first case, which was suppressed, but she got all the court documents. So
Right.
all the interviews with the people who were under investigation at that point are in the public record, and so she was able to access those. And among the people named then was Virginia Roberts. Now you told me you started reading the book.
Yes, I have. I've pretty much finished it actually. It's incredibly interesting. I mean, amongst other things, she admits that she herself was a kind of procurer for the network. She was in this weird state of psychological dependency, or maybe physical and financial dependency. She was scared. She was also maybe she felt trapped. I don't know. So she did do jobs for them, as well as being abused by them and by the men that they were serving her up to.
Yeah,
Incredible book.
In Conchita's reporting, she has the transcript of a telephone when by the time she was in Australia, um, there was still stuff going on, and so a lawyer in Florida called Virginia in Australia, and Conchita's got the transcript of that telephone conversation, and it's fascinating because this is what I guess 2014 or so. She said that Epstein had offered to set her up in her own mansion and have a child by him. He wanted her to be the mother of a child. And I don't know if that's in the book or not, but she was kind of outraged by that proposal. That really upset her. That was one of the things that upset her. But that shows how important she was to him.
Yes. Well, he certainly seems to. I mean, it's a fairly short time period, really. It's 2 or 3 years when she seems to be the main woman, the main girl.
That's right. Yeah,
She's,
main
she's
girl. Yeah,
barely of age. I mean, she gets into it when she's 17, and it lasts for
yeah,
a couple of years.
yeah.
Um, it's an amazing story, and I guess what a lot of it, at least to people outside of Britain, it leads to is that there is this sense of mystery around the Epstein files. That somewhere there is a document or a pile of documents that will implicate dozens and dozens of really famous people, and maybe that will include past and previous presidents and great captains of industry and so on and so forth. But which is, I guess, still we still don't really know if that's true, do we?
Well, there's some clues to that, and I think that the um, fascinating thing about looking at Conchita's stuff is that the person who's missing then is Clinton, because he's of no significance then at all. He's not running for office, and he's just one of the many friends of Epstein. But he at that point, what she was interested in was were two people who were very prominent. One was Alan Dershowitz, the superstar lawyer, the O.J. Simpson superstar lawyer, who took many trips on Epstein's plane. And by the way, interesting enough, in 2022, Virginia withdrew um, a statement she made about Dershowitz being present during an orgy. She she said she may have misidentified him. So at that point, the Dershowitz connection was left with his many trips on the plane, which are very well documented, and his vigorous defense of Epstein, that he was a very voluble defender of Epstein. So that remained. The um, the other figure at that time who was obviously a magnet for attraction was Bill Clinton, um, because that started very early on, almost as immediately after Clinton left office, and then when he was building the Clinton Foundation, and Epstein. There's a dispute over how much money Epstein gave the Clinton Foundation. He's on record as giving $25,000, but according to Conchita's book, he actually put put up 4 million for the first Clinton gathering in New York, called the Clinton Global Initiative. And then there is the record of how many flights Bill Clinton took on the Lolita Express, as it was called. The the Clintons admit to about 8, but according to Conchita, it's at least 17
Wow.
flights. And interesting enough,
I mean, do
um,
these plane trips always involve we're going to go somewhere where there'll be a party, or
that's right.
is it sometimes
Yeah,
free flight somewhere innocent?
that's right. They are. I mean, in fact, they're freebies. They're very highly valued freebies to be flown somewhere where he wants to go for political reasons, but they're also flights connected with the Epstein network as well. So I don't like reading stuff from
And I
books, but
do, I do. It's
there's, there's a quote from Virginia about Clinton, and this is part of the telephone conversation. Um, and the lawyer says, "Have you any recollection of Jeffrey Epstein specifically telling you that Bill Clinton owes him favors?" And her answer is, "Yes, I do. I remember asking Jeffrey, 'What's Bill Clinton doing here?' And he laughed and he said, 'Well, he owes me a favor.' He never told me what favors they were, and I never knew. He told me a long time ago that everyone owes him favors. They're all in each other's pockets." So that's quite interesting. And then now, for me, that ties into a real blooper that happened a few weeks ago. There's a guy that people in Britain will never have heard of, called Howard Lutnick, who's the Commerce Secretary, Clinton's Trump's Commerce Secretary, and he's a bit of a loose cannon. He's like a lot of the people in the Clinton cabinet, self-made man, um, and with weird ideas. But anyway, he immensely irritated um, Trump a couple of weeks ago because he was interviewed by the New York Post on their podcast, and he was interviewed because he was a neighbor in Palm Beach of Epstein's, a very close neighbor. So he knew what had been going on, and he came out and said that the quote is, "This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever." So that
really.
introduced, yeah, so that introduced to me for the first time the concept of another layer of what Epstein might have been up to if what he says is true, is that first of all you trap the person, the honey trap works, and then after that you blackmail them. So
It
make of
is. I
that what
mean,
you will.
as well as this, this mother load of Epstein files, and I gather that when the American government's system starts to function again, there's going to be a vote about trying to release some more of these. But also, there are these suggestions that there are hours and hours of videotapes that the FBI mysteriously seized. These could be urban myths, but I guess if such videotapes exist, it might well sit well with the idea that he's the greatest blackmailer ever lived. I don't know.
Well, it would, yeah, it would tie in with that. I think another thing that's really worth discussing is what is it that Trump's really worried about? Because that's in there because I do not believe. I mean, Trump has many serious character defects, but I don't think that being a depraved pervert is one of them. And I don't think he will ever have had sex with underage women. I really don't, because Trump is a classic example if you talk about his sexual culture, the whole background in which his taste in women was formed, and they're all very much of a type. I mean, there are two or three of them in his cabinet now, and it's what I call Playboy Mansion aesthetic. That
Yeah,
the 1970s were the crucial period which framed his social and sexual activity. So we're talking about long sideburns and flared pants,
yes,
and and the Playboy Mansion.
but
And in the he was sexual. I think you could ask the question: how do misogynists make love? And I think that first of all, he's a self-confessed groper because of the Access Hollywood tape thing. He talked about groping women, and then we have at least two court cases in which we can look at what women encountered from him. One was the um, E. Jean Carroll case in which she alleged that he jumped her in Bergdorf Goodman. She charged him with rape, but actually the jury didn't accept rape; they accepted only sexual assault. But that was a certain time. And then, of course, there's the wonderful, delicious Stormy Daniels
Daniel,
story,
yeah,
yeah, in which she describes in far too clinical detail what it was like having sex with Trump, and it was he's a conventional bonker, it's classic bonking.
yeah, yeah. I think I know what you're saying, and yes, Playboy centerfold kind of women are the
That's
ones
right.
he likes.
Yeah.
Did you know, by the way, just to completely interrupt this conversation, on their second date, they watched a documentary that I made, and it was on the front page of the New York Times. It was called Ocean of Fear, and it was the Shark Week premiere event of 2007. And they watched it together. And she said, "Well, I've turned up. I've been paid to have sex with this man. Actually, I guess I'm going to do it." And he says, "No, sit down. We've got to finish this great film." So
That's a great tribute to you.
well, I have
Yeah,
to say it was a film so compelling that Donald Trump chose to watch it rather than have sex with somebody who'd already paid to have sex with him. So there you go. But that is a genuinely true story. But the Trump thing's fascinating because in the book, a lot of people were desperate to get dirt on Trump in the book, and there's a certain amount of
yeah,
disappointment because she's like, "Oh, he was nice. She works for him, low down the pecking order in
yeah,
Mar-a-Lago. She thinks he's a gentleman. He never does anything wrong." And also, I think she was a bit of a Republican in her politics. And
yeah.
finally, she believed, I think, in the last few, months of her life, that he would release these files, which he's now apparently reluctant to release. So pick the bones out of that. I don't really know.
Well, I don't know because the mystery is, he said several times explicitly that he was quite happy to have the files released. And then when he was told by Pam Bondi that he was mentioned himself many times, I come back to this thing: what is he worried about? Because at
Is it
at
money,
the
do you think?
moment,
Is it money? Did he borrow money off Epstein?
well, yeah, I wonder about that. Since Epstein was using that as we said, as a form of blackmail to influence people. But I think that it's hard to believe that there's anything in there that would tell us anything more about Donald Trump than we already know. I
Hmm.
mean, to extend this thing about Playboy Mansion, the aesthetic of the White House has changed. So he's decorated the Oval Office with all this gold, all these weird gold pots and that's a Playboy Mansion aesthetic too. And that
Saddam
now he's
Hussein's,
demanding.
Saddam Hussein's toilet.
That's right. And now he's demolishing the East Wing, would you
I
believe it? To
know, it's
build
sacrilege. It's a.
so anyway, so what is the ticking bomb? If there's a ticking bomb, what is it?
I don't know. I mean, I thought you might tell me, but you don't know either. Otherwise, you'd have put it in the Daily Beast.
Well,
Nobody knows.
also, as I circle this story, looking for any nuggets that I can pick up, and particularly things that I can link that haven't been previously linked. So you see a kind of pattern, which is what I felt when I was reading Contisha Sarnoff's stuff again, because I was working at the Daily Beast when she was doing those stories, and so I can't remember the atmosphere and how many. And she tried to go beyond that. She published the book in 2016, by the way, with a lot of legal problems, but it came out and there was a lot. It completes this picture of, as I said earlier, it's how the network worked and these layers of girls who have had sometimes ambiguous roles of being but both procurers and players in the orgies. So she brought clarity to, and she brought scale to it, because you talk about scale in a business. He really scaled that thing.
Actually, it's a weird thing. I was saying this to my wife, actually. There's something Dickensian, I think, about this book. It's the kind of gargoyles characters, very cruel, very violent. Everything's extreme and gaudy. You've got extreme wealth and extreme poverty intermingled. You've got rough children's homes. You've got people being dragged into motels and attacked. You've got Svengali figures. Then suddenly you're in this world of kind of opulent gold gilt Mar-a-Lago, and then you're whisked off in a private jet to the big end of town. There's something kind of extraordinarily kind of broad in the world that she
Well, it
finds
is.
herself in,
Yeah, you're right. It has a kind of updated Dickensian quality.
but also kind of
Um,
brutal and horrible in the way Dickens was too. I mean, her childhood, everything that happens to her, she's almost conditioned to be a victim, to trade on the fact that
the other thing you've got
men want her.
going, also, other thing you've got going on here is a significant member of the royal family um, being one of the worst abusers in this whole story, and even as we now know, as a result of the newly released email stuff, that he wanted to do black ops on her, wanted to find stuff on her that would disqualify her as a witness.
Well, I think the Andrew material, I mean, it is cringe and toe curling and shocking because it just feels so plausible. The picture that she paints of him and their time together, even though he doesn't seem to be one of these men that brutalize her, we'll maybe come on to that. There's something kind of awfully sort of, you can
Well, as she
imagine, you
said,
can imagine him doing the things she says he does very easily, I
yeah,
think.
and also it was the noblesse oblige stuff about, he expected me to do this because he's a prince.
And also her slightly sort of childlike, because she's still basically a child. She's saying,
Absolutely.
oh, my mum will be so impressed I've met a prince. Oh my goodness. It's
So
like a
that lead, that
Hallmark
lead,
movie, but with rape.
so that leads me to another side of this story in terms of connections. A lot of attention is always paid, as it should be, to the how the girls were hooked. A lot less attention is paid to how the clients were hooked, and
Mm.
and who was important in that process of bringing in the clients. Now, Maxwell was a sort of mastermind here because her social connections were far greater than Epstein's social connections. Incidentally, I remember that in the disastrous BBC interview, Andrew said that he regretted ever meeting Epstein, and he only met her because he was introduced to him by Maxwell. So, everything seems to flow back to Maxwell. So, my point about the who hooks the clients is that um, there's obviously Andrew had a star quality to him that was used as bait to bring other people, people like Woody Allen, impressed by being in the same room as a prince. God knows why, but he was. And that phenomenon really, and of course, it may also be true at Clinton. If you have Clinton in a room, having in the room attracts other powerful people. First of all, they think if Bill's here, then it's respectable, and if Bill's here, then I should be there because it's a kind of in the pecking order of celebrities. It's pretty at the stratospheric level. So that it had that magnetic effect as well, and there must be other cases of this too. Um, So I always think that not enough has been told about Maxwell, that her influence in that way of bringing in clients, but also her influence on Epstein himself in teaching him how to how to build and exploit
Very
an
interesting.
important.
Actually, I think, you know, to Virginia, Epstein is just a bigger and more powerful version of the men she's always known, in that they're going
Yeah,
to use her and
yeah.
they're going to abuse her. But with Maxwell, it's in a sense she's the true villain of this book, the biggest villain, because um, the, she has more agency than I'd expected. I mean, both in terms of the
Oh,
sex, because she's also saying,
yeah,
"Come into this room, we'll do these things together."
yeah.
And so she's a bit of a sexual predator herself, but she seems to have a lot more agency in pushing around the places on the chessboard, of which Virginia is one, and kind of running the operation and not being sort of the sidekicks. Well, not being a junior to Epstein, more or less an equal, I think.
That's what I feel, and I think it's understated. Now, I want to make another point as a journalist, as a very old journalist who's been around a long, long time, that this seems to me, I launched the Insight Investigative Team, and this seems to me a story that's in serious need of a deep and long reconstruction now of pulling all these elements together, understanding what we do know and what we don't know, because what we do know has advanced a lot in the last 6 months. And if this was if I was editing the Insight team now, which I'm obviously not, this is a classic case of a deep narrative dive done in chapters. Who met whom, when and where, and how did that transaction go? How did this gradually become transactional? And if it became a business, what kind of business was it? How wide was its grip globally? And what are the consequences going? Because it's much bigger than the Trump thing. It's a kind of as you said, it's a dark Dickensian social drama. It's a display of political power of the worst kind. It's a display of the power of money, the power of a social class. It's all those things. It's a classic case of 21st century venality and corruption and perversion and God knows what. It's
No,
the
you're right.
biggest there's
The other sort of parallels that leap to mind are sort of Bonfire of the Vanities, or and the book that was based on, Vanity Fair itself. This kind of because they're about the human condition, and they're about cruelty, and they're about power, and they're about abuse, and that's why we're fascinated by them, of course. But the other thing that really also is getting everybody talking here is in the American edition. There's this prime minister who is quoted as being the most brutal and awful of all of the clients she was forced to see, who beat her and scared her and choked her, made her fear for her life. And then apparently she goes to Epstein and complains, I'm not seeing him again. And Epstein says, well, this will sometimes happen. But in the British edition of the book, apparently it's not a prime minister, it's an ex-minister
ex-minister.
or a former minister. They've took the word prime out. I mean, it's early days yet. The book isn't even physically in print. I've only read it in the Kindle, so
Yeah,
maybe I'm jumping the gun. But that you know how journalism works.
yeah.
Somebody is going to want to find out who that man was, and there can't be
I
that
hope so.
many ministers or possibly prime ministers in the circle. But have any been mentioned before?
No,
It's
no.
European,
I mean,
isn't it? Not American.
Tony Blair was mentioned, but obviously it's not him. I mean, I think um, in a glancing kind of way, but not really. Um, no,
Anyway,
it's
it's
a.
just, it's one of those stories I think is going to really attract the higher end of the investigative set, because that's a big.
I hope it does because it sounds extremely sinister,
No, it does.
and uh, and my mind is racing to fit types to that story.
Well, I don't know whether he got involved with any of the oligarch set. That seems to be a different level of kind of debauchery and depravity happening in a different part of the world.
Yeah,
The
it was. I think. Yeah, that was. I think. quite independent. He had a full-time business of his own, I think.
I mean, deep down, at the very basis of this, what did Epstein actually want? Did he just like being a player, or did he have a game plan to build something extraordinary? And this sort of network of sexual gift giving was just a part of a bigger kind of empire he was trying to build.
I think he got ecstatically excited over having discovered a form of power which made him um, very extremely influential. And you know, uh, the physical settings of it are. You've got the New Mexico place, which was a very uh, that was like a Playboy mansion, isolated and away from all public gaze, and not connected in any way with politics, except for Bill Richardson, who was the governor of New Mexico at the time, um, with any political connections. And then you've got the townhouse, the most expensive townhouse in Manhattan, as the social networking uh, at the peak. Then you've got Florida as the playground for the very rich, which is another piece of theatre. So, and then you've got the Caribbean island finally as a kind of Doctor No type
Yeah,
secret.
yeah. I mean, it's just remarkable. And then of course the trips to Balmoral and Sandringham that Andrew can arrange. I mean, that was
Oh, well, that's Maxwell, though. You see, I think the fact that Maxwell got him into. I've always thought that that was outrageous that they were posing together in a little house in the grounds of Balmoral. I mean, that's really obscene. That's contamination. You know, that when you get someone inside the royal family that bad, that's contamination. And this Dumbo Andrew, he's so stupid. I mean, and so hungry, and so his cupidity is amazing. I mean, just anything, any chance of money, he grabs it. I mean, what an idiot!
oh, I
And
know.
is he
Well,
going to?
you've read and I've read Andrew Loney's book, and he's my
Yeah,
mate. He's your mate.
yeah,
That's chapter and verse on that. But comparing the two is quite interesting. He still had glamour. I mean, he was probably seen as a bit of a laughing stock to a certain type of British person by then. But to the outside world, even if you're Woody Allen, he's a royal prince. You know.
yeah. By the way, another guy who deserves credit for outing a lot of this stuff is Norman Baker, the Lib Dem MP,
Yes, friend
who
of
in
ours.
2019 produced that book about all the stuff that Andrew was up to. And in fact, he had Peter Mandelson in there. He had the Peter Mandelson Epstein link. He said that Epstein had 10, 10 phone numbers in his black book for Peter Mandelson. So let's talk about Peter Mandelson, who was a real social hustler. I mean, he was a net. He was someone who knows him very well, and was very high in the Labour Party, said he'd never seen a networker as efficient as Mandelson. He was the super master networker. He built up this whole network of connections, of whom Epstein was the one who brought him down.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can safely say that Peter wasn't interested in sex with young women because he
Uh,
was gay. But there's something intoxicating about the circuit, the parties, the travel, the island, the other people. Just that you're part of this, the global village elite level. You're in it, and people love that.
Get over the fact that Peter Mandelson in a white bathrobe talking to Epstein. That picture of the
Yeah.
two of them together. It's the the extrasensory uh, fumes coming off of that were considerable.
Well, there was a certain affection, wasn't there, in those emails, which is what really brought
Yes,
it down.
affection. I mean, absolute
Even,
abject praise.
you're a great guy. I'm sorry you've had this trouble with the law. We'll stay friends. Oh my God. But I mean, there's a lot of this in Trump. We say Trump might be off the hook, but he did write that weird card, didn't he?
He did.
In the
Yes,
shape, and he said things like, here's to more wonderful secrets. What does that mean?
yes. Well, there's the thing. Is it? You see, guilt by association. At least he knew everything that was going on.
You think so?
Maybe that's what worries him the most. Yeah, it was impossible to have that kind of relationship with Epstein without knowing what was going on.
So, all right, you're sitting in America. Nothing much is happening in government because there's one of those kind of, you know,
Yeah.
stalemates in Congress. Once that's sorted out, what's the next step? And do you think we will be seeing a complete, you know, it's all on the table. Here's everything we have shown to the rest of the world, or do you think Trump's going to dig his feet in and try and stop it?
Phil, I think you hit it on the head when you said that there's a sort of electricity to the phrase Epstein files without having any clue about what the Epstein files actually are and how much dynamite there is in them. So you can only gauge you can only gauge what might be in them by the lengths to which Trump is going to try to not reveal them. And the fact that they keep stalling this vote in the House that would require them to reveal them because they've now got a majority with the woman that they're trying to haven't sworn in yet, and that's their delaying tactic to make this vote not happen for as long as possible. But in the end, it's ineluctable in my view. It's unstoppable. It will come out. The pressure is too great, and the stuff is too great. So I kind of wander back to my original question: why is he so worried about it?
No, well, maybe one day we'll find that out. I don't know. It's just one of those stories that it's slightly frustrating because we know now the sort of the terrible damage, especially through Virginia's story, and we know it's brought down various people, and he's ended up in prison, and he's dead, and she's in prison. But I still don't think anybody really understands what it was all about. It's just
No, and
it's a kind of miasma at the heart of this story, so to me, anyway.
every day I get up in the morning and think, God, another day of Trump, and it gets very serious with Trump when he takes a phone call from Putin and suddenly swings round to accepting Putin's terms for ending the war in Ukraine, and then yesterday reverses himself again and says, "Oh, it's a waste of time talking to Putin. I'm not going to bother." So Putin then starts bombing Ukraine again. I mean, that's really serious stuff, and the idea that this man is in jeopardy from something as relatively unserious as this, or as well, it's not unserious. There are very serious elements in it, as you said, but I mean, in the scale of 1 to 10, in terms of consequences, it's much lower down than the other stuff.
Yeah, indeed. Well, it gives us fascinating stuff to gossip about, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And but the minute you know what's happening, please let me know.
Well, I will. I'll let you know, and 20,000 other people straight away.
Thank you, mate. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Appreciate your time. Bye. Always a pleasure to talk to Clive. Thank you for staying with me. Next week, actually, well, there won't be next week, but next fortnight. I'm just scanning ahead. I mentioned I've done a live with Shauna, but Shauna and I are going to do a whole program as well. So on this ever developing story of the Virginia Giuffre's book and Andrew and Epstein, because we think I don't think we've covered it all. And there's so much in the book that's really worth teasing out and talking about. And Shauna, as you know, reads those books very carefully and always has interesting things to say. So I think the next program will be that. Then hopefully the one after will be Andy Webb on Diana and Bashir. He's bringing out his final investigation of the BBC and the program that changed Diana's life and caused a most amazing kind of meltdown at the BBC and a cover-up. And various friends of mine were involved in that. I used to work with Bashir. I was on Panorama myself. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. So, but that might not be the next, that might be the one after. So lots of interesting things to look forward to. Hopefully by then I won't be walking around quite so much with my stick. I'll keep you informed. I will send health updates on Twitter for those who are interested. So yeah, send me your quack cures for sciatica because I need them. All the best. Thanks a lot. Bye. This has been a Podcast World production. If you want to contact me, write to team@podcastworld.org, placing Scandalmongers in the heading, or you can reach out via the social media links in the show's bio. And if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to support the show, please consider taking a few seconds to hit the donate button found just below this video. Many thanks, and see you next week.